jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
All right, welcoming aboard Darren Gaskell from the HD Movie Podcast and Mad About Horror. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Always good, bloody good. So yeah, we're just gonna get into some more underappreciated Giallo films. So I'm gonna let you start off by how you got into this tough to describe subgenre.
I think it was probably it was a way that most people I think got into it. It was watching Argento's movies first, and I think it was the usual way in. It was Suspiria, it was Deep Red, it was Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and then moving on from there, finding out that there was lots and lots of other strange and weird movies, mostly Italian, that were churned out mostly across the 70s, but with a couple in the 80s and some more recent ones. So
you
there was
saw
a good,
Enzo G, Castellari, Lucio Fulci, a lot of those guys. Okay.
yeah, and I guess I'd seen Fulci's more gory stuff. I'd kind of seen The Beyond and House by the Cemetery, and it was going back on his earlier filmography. I'd picked up on things like Don't Torture a Duckling and The Psychic and things like that. So there was a very good DVD company over here called Shameless Films, which I think is still going, who released a ton of these Giallo films, and I ended up getting most of them on DVD.
Very nice. And it was so fortunate that in the first run DVDs, they did actually present them all uncut. It wasn't just we have the old, 70s TV edit,
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. It was nice to see them mostly in the version that they were meant to be seen, because I think a few of them probably squeaked out on VHS in the UK in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure most of them will have been cut in some way. I do remember
video nasties.
Yeah, I do remember seeing What Have You Done to Solange on the TV, and it was a satellite channel over here, but even then, I think they'd cut like a minute out of it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I mean,
yeah, because obviously you don't need, and apparently, well, I mean, the minute of it was kind of the central murder in the middle of it, so you kind of got a flavour of what it was doing, but you also thought, well, okay, it undercut everything else in the movie. So whereas I was quite happy to watch a version of What Have You Done to Solange because it was the first time I'd seen it, I kind of felt shortchanged as well because it was pretty obvious where they'd made the cuts.
Oh, bummer. So yeah, that whole excitement is like, I've never seen this before, and then you're like, well, I'm not getting the full picture, so it's as good as not seeing it at all. So yeah, I know what you mean. Where it does suck, where it's like, well, when it's on a better channel that you respect, and it's like, well, but I still don't have the complete cut of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I think some people are still getting that anyway when they go onto the streaming platforms. It's like, okay, I'll test the waters, see if I even like the movie to begin with, and then if I really like it, I'm gonna still have to pay and buy the expensive Blu-ray because there's more complimentary, special features, or Prime had a less presentable, older copy enhanced HD, or again, something got cut just because of policy standards on the streaming side, or that's just as good a version as they got.
Yeah. I mean, as well, I guess we're going back to the video nasties as well. So we were kind of used to getting things cut in the UK. I mean, there were versions of movies that pretty much shouldn't have been released over here. That there was so much missing from them, and I think Giallo was less harshly dealt with. But even so, anytime there was a murder in anything, I mean, the British censors were kind of, no, we're not gonna allow that. Let's just cut all the violence out. So
yeah, and everything that makes it good.
Some of these movies were a very frustrating experience when you saw them for the first time. I mean, just going off the topic slightly, I mean, I watched a copy of Absurd, and I watched the uncut version. It was the Italian Joe D'Amato movie, and I saw the uncut version on VHS and thought, this is crazy, this movie. And then it had been around for a while, and the BBFC thought, yeah, let's not have this playing anymore, and they sent out a cut version which basically took every single bit of violence out of it, and I actually got hold of a copy of the cut version, and it was the dullest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it didn't fare too much better, because that also kind of just became a thing for like just American movies in general. It's like, okay, well, so
yeah,
if it's regular cable, I got the cut version. I want a better version, I got to go to the video store a few months later, and vice versa. Well, it's on the satellite channel, so that's the full uncut version now. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Go to the video store.
I mean,
I got
certainly
so much now.
Certainly for the, I mean, back to Giallo, I mean, Bay of Blood, which was the Bava movie, which came out in 1971, which is kind of a cross between a Giallo and a slasher movie, because they often cite it as an inspiration for Friday the 13th. That managed to get by mostly uncut. I think there was 2 scenes when I first got it on video, and I think it was cut by about 40 seconds. There's a murder where some guy opens the door and he gets a cleaver in the face, and then there's the bit where Brigitte Sky is running up the hill towards the house, and the machete comes round and slashes her throat, and that was trimmed quite a lot, but the rest of it is fairly intact. And now you can get it completely uncut here anyway, and I think that's a good entry point, A Bay of Blood, because it kind of satisfies 2 different types of film fans, because it is a Giallo, but it's also a proto slasher movie. So if you're into things like Friday the 13th and The Burning and all those kind of campsite massacre movies, then it sort of has a foot in that camp as well. So if you're not a big Giallo fan, I think Bay of Blood is something that I guess purist Giallo fans are a bit snobby about, because they say, well, it's not a real Giallo. But I think it's a better entry point, because if you went into something like, well, say House with the Laughing Windows, which is a Pupi Avati movie, which is 1976, which is a really good Giallo, but that's for kind of hardcore fans. I think if you just dropped somebody in to that movie as an entry-level point, by halfway through they'd be thinking, yeah, it's not for me, I'm out.
I'm used to snobbery, because it seems like anything that's just atypical, gets attacked. I've had to tell many horror and action fans, well, you technically like this or that, or it technically counts as that thing, that you technically don't like this subgenre of. And I just had to say, can you just chill, It's like, well, I'll put it this way. This style is here to stay as much as you dislike it. So
yeah,
might as well find the ones that are good, as opposed to just writing it all off saying there's no good ones. I'm like, oh, well, I've already found 5 I like. So yeah, I was cool with Giallo, because it's kind of like noir. It's already a subgenre or a style that became its own genre in a way, despite what IMDb claims. And it's like, yeah, I'm cool with them kind of changing it up once in a while and blending a bunch of other stuff, where it was with, zombies and Egyptian, Sphinx, yeah, or some other typical, like you say, haunted house, home invasion, or slasher. And it's like, yeah, it was pretty cool. And we were talking Argento at the start, I'd like to actually say that Crystal Plumage is definitely very underseen and very underappreciated. His other earlier films are either good but kind of end abruptly because of the budget, or just had to end it with a shocking style. But this one I thought flowed better, and the one movie he came up with a story for and just co-produced that I really liked was in '97 was the Wax Mask, which I think you can still find on places like Vudu or Tubi, and it's very underappreciated, pretty original concept of just what happens to the wax figures in a museum. Are they actually killers?
Yeah, I think that was that the one that I think Fulci was going to direct it originally, but
I think so. And then he hired someone else who had been involved with the Black Demons and Demons franchise, and is like, that's fine because that guy was totally used to doing all that kind of stuff. He later worked on The Sect, so.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, Demons, it's one of my favorites anyway. So anybody that's associated with Demons gets my votes. It's about as far as from Giallo as you can possibly get, but it's still got that Italian style to it. It's a great movie, Demons. Even though it's one of those movies that pulls out that twist where it's like, well, huge spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen Demons, but it's kind of we've written ourselves into a corner both figuratively and literally. Well, what are we going to do now? Oh, let's have a helicopter crash through the building.
Right. You got, it's pretty much at that point totally became some kind of, if you want to say, just kind of, these movies are treated just like stand up. It's like every joke's got to be way more brutal, way more nasty than the last. Every gross out gag should really make people start fainting by this point. It's just awesome. And like you say, it's not easy to do. And those who didn't like it, much like those who claim they only like certain genres, often just haven't really seen much, or they've just seen clips and they just instantly just write it off. And you just have to say, well, this is what we're watching tonight. It's a pretty damn good movie, so out of luck. But it's not easy to say to everyone because, again, like you say, you want to respect different opinions, and at the same time, you want to say, well, also, please stop villainizing what I like. Especially when you're coming off as very ignorant. I've had to even stop some of my folks sometimes when they're using a certain label and a certain music kind of. I'm like, okay, well, please don't say that in public. You're gonna instigate a fist fight. I'm telling you, and people take that shit seriously, and you kind of just shat over it without intending. It's like, take this as serious as you would any racial slur. Don't say that.
I don't think I'm a rabid sort of supporter of Giallo in that I'm forcing it on people. I will give people suggestions about what they want to watch if they are thinking about dipping their toes in the Giallo waters. And I've been to festivals where Giallos are played quite often, and people who haven't seen them before have drifted into them. And I think it depends what the Giallo is like. I think there's a reasonable hit rate with something that doesn't have a complete and utter level of weirdness. I think The Psychic went down pretty well, the Lucio Fulci movie, because it's got more of a conventional plot. It's more of a standard thriller, even though it's got some oddness in there. Whereas something like there was a recent Giallo by the Anetti brothers called Abracadabra, and that played a festival 3 years ago, I think, and I loved it. I thought it was really great and touched on all the Giallo sort of stereotypes, but still was its own movie. And it just finished. One of the things about Abracadabra is, and one thing that they'd done is that they build the movie as running 90 minutes, and it gets to 70 minutes, and the movie just stops. And I thought, okay, something weird's going to happen now, and the credits are rolling. And I'm thinking, well, this has only been running an hour and 10 minutes. We've got 20 minutes to go with this movie, and I can see where the movie is going to go after the credits finish rolling. And I was waiting and waiting, and the credits stopped rolling, and then the lights go up, and then I'm thinking, is anything actually going to happen after this? Because the lights have gone up now, because that's a pretty good trick if they're going to start the movie again. And it didn't. It just finished. They'd got the running time wrong. And people were saying, and I thought, well, that was a really cool way of ending it. But everybody else in the cinema was like, what? What is that, the movie? And I think it just threw everybody. And I think, it was a thrill for somebody like me, but I guess somebody who just come in because they were vaguely interested in what this movie was going to do was just sitting there thinking, well, what was that? I don't understand what was going on.
Although I gotta admit, it is kind of annoying how today's audience thinks, that's now just a thing. I'm like, no, before Christopher Nolan, before all these other movies that just relied on just a gimmick to get you in before, it became just back to the lazy fashion, which is names, names. This is like, well, there were plenty of other movies which just blew people's minds, and it didn't have anything to do. Well, sometimes it did, but most of the time it didn't even matter. How many beverages or what you're smoking or snorting. It's like, no, there's plenty of reasons for why this ruled back in its day was because it just people were talking about it afterwards that getting a bite to eat. And it's just like, yeah, what did we just see? Maybe we should just see it again.
Yeah. And I think with some of the Giallo movies, if you'd had several drinks or had done some drugs beforehand, I think you'd come out of it thinking, I'm none the wiser. I mean, some of these movies are hard to pick through when you're sober. So if you've had a couple of beers, then you'd come out of that thinking, I just do not know what I've watched. But that's kind of makes it fun as well on a certain level. But yeah, I like the fact that as well, Giallos that kind of sneak in criticism of certain things. I mean, there's a good one called Who Saw Her Die, which has got George Lazenby in it, which was post Bond when he kind of was. Well, I don't think he was scratching around for work, but he'd done the Bond movie, and it was like 3 years after, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he kind of turns up in this Giallo movie, and it's about a father who he's investigating the death of his daughter. And because there were certain movies at the time, the Italian government and the Catholic Church basically were very critical of things that were appearing on TV and film. But for some reason, because Giallo was an underappreciated genre and nobody really was kind of paying much attention to it at the time, it was there, but I think it was doing a lot better overseas than in Italy. I mean,
Who Saw Her Die? There was a Bond villain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Who Saw Her Die is astonishingly critical of the Catholic Church. If you watch it, you just think, how did this get passed in Italy? Because if the Catholic churches had taken one look at it, they'd have thought, this paints them in an extremely bad light. But there it is. So it's just, and it's there on the screen. It's not even subtext in that movie. It's text. It's just like, there you go. There are very bad guys in this movie, and they happen to be part of the church.
Right. And I mean, you gotta appreciate just the fact that people could go there back then, and now is like, if you even bring up religion as being discussed in your movie just ahead of time, you're just like dead on arrival. You pretty much got to keep it subdued, or it's got to be like a crime show where you got to hint at what kind of religion or the characters are a part of, and it's just impossible to have an open chat. There's always going to be just someone who's like, you can watch that show, now you can't watch that show, now you can't watch that movie because it's got this, and if you watch it, you offend me. And it's like, okay, now you're using religion to control what I watch.
Yeah. Whereas Who Saw Her Die was just like, I mean, it's not kind of they didn't care, but it was just like, there you go. We want to criticize this particular aspect of organized religion, and there you go. We're not even going to couch it in anything. We're going to just show it as it is. And it's like, it's basically the climax of the movie is like, look at all the terrible things this bit of the Catholic Church is doing. And I mean, for me, watching it for the first time a few years ago, it was quite surprising. Even in the Giallo movie, it was kind of, this was being so overtly critical that, and kind of wrapping it up in a Giallo style mystery, that I think it's a movie that people don't appreciate as much as they should, because it's not full of gore and the characterizations are a little less bizarre than they normally would be in Giallo movies. So it's a little more.
CSI is so Giallo inspired; it would not exist without these.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
and it's funny how we're used to it now, but back then, taboo. Can't do anything. You can do a fist fight and a bloody nose. That's it. Bloody hell, you can't do that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they do. I do like them to sort of. Yeah, I mean, I don't want them to be sort of sneaking messages in all the time. It doesn't work like that. I mean, I'm just as happy sitting watching something like Blood and Black Lace, where it's just, it's fashion models being menaced by a black glove killer. But this is a good thing about Giallo. It's to excuse the pun with what I've just been saying about Who Saw a Die, but it's a broad church.
All good. Yeah, I mean, and it's that's so well played. But yeah, I mean, it's and I'm sure it's just also so funny how at the time everyone would just kind of like how when they, as a contrast, different genre, but it's kind of like how when the Pythons were encountered in public and everyone would just accuse them of being on drugs, especially Terry Gilliam with his weird animation is like, and Folsey and all those guys would just continually everyone would accuse them of, you were easy to work with and everything, but god damn, you're a monster, you killed a dog. You had some poor lady get a belly. It's like, he's just, I've heard these guys are all nice people, it's just they're pretty much trying to make the distributor happy, and it's not like they were having to sink to Roger Corman standards of, I gotta have some fucked up shit happen in my movie just to sell it. It's like, no, they're being very creative because of the art style and just how it was introduced. And it's like, do I think some bad things came out of it? Yeah, sure. I think Dario Argento made a mistake of casting his daughter Asia, and it's like, look what she was revealed to be. And it's like, kind of screwed her mind because it's out there. It's definitely bonkers. So it's like, but I mean, I really do dig how American actors would see it at the drive-ins, and that's why they started coming over and appearing in some of those movies. Carl Malden is obviously the biggest example. And it helped that everyone just was good sports about it. It really wasn't any different than all the other international procedurals, and it's just like, okay, but there's going to be a little more over the top stuff. And this is kind of like with any other movie that was being made, is like, it really wasn't even different from, say, a Twilight Zone episode or a Irwin Allen disaster film. Is like, but it's just different production, different focus, and it seems like some other filmmakers could have been this kind of done this kind of genre, but they didn't. They just often would just do different kinds of B or Z grade movies.
I mean, you've got people like talking about the American actors. I mean, you got people like John Saxon in Tenebrae. I mean, John Saxon did quite a lot of, he did a fair amount of exploitation, certainly in the 80s. I mean, did things like Cannibal Apocalypse. I mean, I'm not particularly sure that John Saxon is particularly proud of Cannibal Apocalypse, but he should be, because it's a pretty damn good thriller.
Especially after almost dying in that one movie that had like a helicopter crash. It's like, jeez. It's like, after that, he didn't do anything that was non-SAG. He's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, he's there in Tenebrae. You've got Tony Franciosa's in Tenebrae as well. So it's, they were casting pretty decent actors and pretty well-known actors as well at the time. So, I mean, you've got, going back to the Psychic, you've got Jennifer O'Neill in the lead of the Psychic. So they were, I mean, I think specifically with Fulci, he was trying to cast people who, I mean, he would fill his movies with Italian actors, but for the principals, he would try to cast his net a bit further, because I think the feeling was generally that English and American actors were a bit more respected. So if you got them headlining your movie, then certainly Catriona MacColl with Fulci, she was very much the English Rose, and it was a very strange experience seeing somebody like Catriona MacColl appearing in something like The Beyond, but it worked, because you got to, and they took these things very seriously. I mean, some of these Giallo movies, if you step back and think about them for less than a couple of seconds, really, you think that's utterly ridiculous. But it's the fact that they're played dead straight, which makes them work.
Totally. And Umberto Lenzi has some good ones. I definitely recommend Black Demons.
Yeah.
He's mostly known for all his hard-boiled cop thrillers and spy movies, but really the only bad one I think I've seen by him is Ghost House. It didn't help that was also a riff track. There's like one good impalement, and just the rest of the movie just kind of just leaves you just saying, okay, you got too disorienting to me, to where it's like I really just lost interest halfway through, despite the decent soundtrack.
Yeah, I think is Seven Deaths in the Cat's Eye Lenzi? Because there's so many of them out there. You kind of think, was that Lenzi? Because you've just got a list of directors and a list of movies. Like, it's like, did Sergio Martino do this one? It's like, was this Antonio Bida? It's great that there's so many of them about, but there is so many that you get. I don't think it's Giallo fatigue, but you get confused with directors. It's like, who did this one and who starred in this one?
Definitely, they were all being offered a lot of the same stuff, like you said.
Yeah. And they've got, I think at one point they were vying for which Giallo movie had the longest title, because some of the titles are almost as long as the movie itself. I mean, I think the one, I may be corrected on this one, but the one that probably has the longest title is Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. Which is a Sergio, and it's pretty decent Giallo, but this is another thing about Giallo movies. I mean, if you went to somebody in the 70s, if you were like a UK filmmaker or a US filmmaker, and you said to somebody, "Oh, I've got a movie," and they said, "What's the title?" and you said, "Oh, Your Vice is a Locked Room and I have the key," they'd say, "You can shorten that title, because we're not putting that on the poster."
Right. It's already going to have 5 different translations everywhere. So yeah, print, no print. I can't even blame him for going even for just a more shocking or just even more cerebral kind of titles, because it really did help sell it, in addition to the electrifying posters, which anyone else who looks at that probably was thinking, oh, is this like Hitchcock's Psycho? Is this Halloween? What is this? And just check it out and just get blown away. And the fact that so many movies like The Beyond have just been remastered endless times is there's definitely countless appreciation for it, and it helps that I think it's just becoming a little more mainstream in a post Blu-ray world than it ever was, just because people are just used to not being looking for stuff that's atypical and just roaming more than just video stores, but thrift stores. There's plenty of people, I'm sure, just buying new stuff and getting rid of it, and it's like, oh no, you should put that on eBay.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of, even the fact that now we've got so much streaming content, I think still, and this is not to have a go at the amount of streaming content we've got out there, there's still quite a lot that's fairly safe and fairly mainstream and is going for the number of views. So there's always going to be people that are going to be looking for something that's kind of on the fringes of everything. And I think Giallo will always be on the fringes, because of its wacky plotting and strange characters, and the fact that every 15 minutes you're going to get some hideously graphic murder in most of them.
Totally, and just rooting out which ones are organized, which ones are entertaining, which ones are just bad, which ones are so bad they're good. It's hard to classify, and it's easy to see how some of those filmmakers, when they move away from it, just kind of just seem like they're hacks, and others is like, well, they had to eat.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's weird that, I mean, I guess with all genres, but I think with Giallo more than anything, there are Giallo movies that I like, and there are people I know who also like Giallo movies, but will look at the same movie and say, well, that's terrible, I can't get on with that. And we're both appreciative of the genre, but I mean, they just, it's like, well, no, I absolutely hate that movie, and I'm thinking like, what are they talking about? That's amazing. And you kind of get this kind of constant battle where I'm, and I mean, I don't think there's a worry about introducing somebody to a Giallo movie, because it kind of creates its own atmosphere as well. And I think there's a reason for loving it as much as a reason for hating it as well. I mean, I know people who just don't get on with them. And that's absolutely fine. I can completely understand why, because they're a very certain type of filmic entertainment. So, I mean, I got a copy of Black Belly of the Tarantula after several years of like wanting to see it, and I love Black Belly of the Tarantula. I think it's great. I think it's got a bonkers plot. It's got a brilliant cast. But again, some people I know who've seen it just said, no, I was bored. And I was like, what? You were bored during this movie? It's like, how could you be bored during this movie?
I mean, people being paralyzed and having their bellies ripped open. That sounds pretty
cool.
Yeah,
absolutely. What's boring about that? And like it's just I mean, even in the pantheon of crazy Giallo plots, that's one of the craziest. And it has got an absolutely fabulous cast. It's got Claudine Auger, who was a Bond girl. It's got a very young Barbara Bach in it. It's got a fantastic cast, and it's got a really twisty mystery in it as well. So when I was raving about it, and I was thinking like, yeah, this is great, I want to introduce it to everybody, and like the first couple of people that watched it said, nah, I didn't get on with it, and I was like, what you didn't get on with it? I mean, I didn't feel affronted or anything, but it's like I just can't understand why, because I loved it.
Sometimes it really is a lost cause. It's like, okay, well, hold it. Okay, so why, and why? I hate this movie. But yeah, it doesn't get any easier. It definitely doesn't help when you just see others who just seem like they're just going to be disappointed by anything, regardless of how it's presented. And then it's just like, okay, well, shut up.
It can be a difficult sell, because you can say, well, you know, I've got you this movie. It's a thriller, but it was shot in the 70s, and it's probably going to be mostly dubbed because the actors weren't mostly English, and it's going to be shot in a particular way, and the color is going to be very saturated. And you might not know where the plot's going for an hour, and there's some fairly graphic violence in it. But if you can get past all of that.
Yeah, it definitely gets very frustrating when you're also to that point where it's like, okay, well, yeah, like I've had other pals on this before where it's like, we would give them movies for their birthdays, and we it was so funny how three of us all had the same reaction where it's like, oh, but it's a low scan, you know, DVD. I'm like, it's the only format it's on. It's just until it gets remastered, that's all you got. So
yeah, I would love these movies to be in 4K, but that's just not going to happen to some of these. You know, you're going to get film companies saying this isn't really worth us putting the effort into.
There are some times where I'll see Shout Factory making announcements, and I'm like, I'm so wish I was the moderator, because some of those guys just are just bitching. It's like, I just wish someone could just perk up and say, can't get that. It's as good as the version as you're gonna get, you know?
Yeah.
Director's cut, not available. TV version that's been talked about in this movie, not available. And do you have 5,000? We don't.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And I mean, certainly on some of the Shameless DVD releases, they'd edited it together from different versions of the film. So it's a fairly hard sell for some movies to start with, but when you're really giving somebody a DVD and then saying, oh, by the way, there are a couple of scenes in this movie that are just in Italian, then they kind of was like, well, why? It's like, well, that's the only version that they've got, and like, you know, it's the most full version of the movie that you can get, but there's a point at which, you know, they will just start speaking Italian and there are no subtitles. And so at that point you kind of catch yourself and thinking like, you know, I can't really sell this movie to anybody who's not really into Giallo.
I can include it as a double feature or a special features or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that sort of supporting, well, being a Giallo fan is a disease. It's in some way, but I think it's
I
some
say
kind
that. Careful how you say that in a post-COVID world.
yeah, probably not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean I think it's kind of it's less dangerous than COVID, but yeah, it's I mean it's kind of an infection that I mean I'm wary about passing it on to people, because it's you can send people down a rabbit hole in terms of Giallo, and some people will accept it and some people will get really into it and some people will just never return your calls again.
Well said. And it gets even more annoying how you can only state it so many different ways, and you can only some of these movies you're gonna have to watch twice. And it's like,
Yes.
But I'm
Yes,
down
absolutely.
for it because it was intended that way. It's not just some
Yeah.
other, Oscar guy winking off, and it's like, okay, well, I know you guys make many top 10 movies of the year, but this Swedish guy, I don't get you. This American guy, definitely don't like you. This Hong Kong filmmaker, fuck you. And but these guys is like, okay, well, they're kind of the Hollywood bad boys, so you kind of, it's kind of like getting mad at seeing, the cool guy in school just being mischievous. Is like, well, what did you expect? It's like it read as clear as day on their face. And so, yeah, these movies is like, I'm cool with revisiting them, even if I didn't like one, because it's like, well, there's going to be plenty of puzzles around the corner. And I'm typically not bored by these kinds of movies because, different period, different pacing, different style. So you get what you get, is like, you gotta make time for it. And like you say, the ones who get annoyed by the translation not being available is like, well, there's plenty of movies which have some, inaudible, dialogue going on, and you can always go on a fan forum and get an idea of what was happening. There's
Exactly.
movie discussions for a reason.
It is interesting what you say about the pacing, because that can be a problem for people, but especially people who are more used to the movies of today, which are very, very fast moving and have to have something happening every few seconds.
And then sometimes you get ones complaining about it going too fast. I'm like, so what will make this better? Everything they're doing is just pissing you off, and you're ruining our enjoyment of this movie. It's like, it's the same thing with horror movies. It's like, okay, I'll do found footage if it's good. I'll do
absolutely.
I'll do just home invasion, mystery horror. I'll do supernatural stuff, even though I'm not a ghost guy. And it's like, same thing with action. I'll do I see people complaining about the shaky cam, and it's like, I've been so used to steady cam and other stuff, so it's like, well, if I can see it, it's fine. If I can't see it, it sucks. But more often than not, some of these, I mean, I notice the ones that get complained about the most are the assassins or spy type movies. I'm like, well, those are attention based. So if you suck at paying attention, just check out now and let us enjoy this. Because I was raised on those kinds of movies, so I'm totally into it. So, and I know a lot of people would be like, but what did that even mean? I'm like, oh my God, he was the ambassador. They were trying to rescue. He was the one guy who implied he was going to betray this. Oh, but it was so predictable. No, you didn't predict that one last part. Everyone
I mean, and I guess with Giallo, I mean, some of them you do have to follow extremely closely. And even if you are following them extremely closely, the kind of final twists and stuff, you think, well, I would have never got that. It's just so out of this world. But some of them, I guess there's the odd Giallo movie where you could actually say, well, I could have tuned out for an hour of that and then it would have made just as much sense at the end. There's the odd one like that. But I think you're right about having to watch them more than once, because there's lots and lots of stuff going on. And I think not my problem with Giallo, I mean, is that they look so beautiful, is that you're kind of dazzled by how brilliantly they're shot. Absolutely. And you tend to miss some of the detail when you first watch them. And that's not a problem, because you can go back and watch it for the dialogue and the clues and everything. But these, the people who made these took them very, very seriously and wanted them to look good as well as be quite good mysteries.
If they're even using kind of some other kind of historical setting, and it's like, okay, that's part of what they're sneaking in with the horror. This is set during a war invasion of this European country. This is, and the killer is basically an allusion to what happened during this so-called historical event. Okay, got it. It's just And sometimes you can do it in one and done and just get other people's take on it. And it's like, but like you say, I mean, I've seen some people tear apart stage fright, and it's like, well, yeah, there's going to be some stuff that didn't work in that, but from a stylist perspective, it totally works because it had to end there and just show how maybe the killer happened in her head or was an actual, supernatural, killer posing as an actor who was killing all the other actors.
Yeah, I mean, stage fright. I think stage fright is an easier sell. I mean, I've introduced quite a lot of people to stage fright over the years, and that's a better hit rate in terms, because I think it's also got, again, I think horror fans can latch onto it because it's got a slasher overtone as well. So, and it's got chainsaws and it's got gore in it, and it's quite fun, and it moves at a fair clip as well. But again, I mean, we got stage fright in the 80s in the UK on VHS, and that was, I mean, it wasn't hugely cut, but it was still cut. So we didn't really get the full unexpurgated version of stage fright until quite a few years down the track. So some of the mayhem in that was edited out. But to be perfectly honest, that's one of the examples where if you'd seen the cut version, it's still pretty fun, really, because most of it survived the cuts. I think there's a couple of moments in it which I think the drill through the door was trimmed a little bit. I think the bit where he picks up the girl in the shower, I think they'd cut a little bit of that. But generally, it wasn't the normal hack job. I think it
wasn't sloppy.
No, it wasn't. I mean, you couldn't really see the joins. I mean, some of the early stuff, when you picked it up certainly in the 80s, the VHS versions of it, that you could, I mean, they were just, it was like somebody had just taken a pair of garden shears to it, and it was like, right, just chop it. And it was like, this is, it was eye-wateringly bad, because you just know where it had been cut. And there was no particular regard to any sort of quality. It was just like, yeah, there's something nasty happening here. Let's just lever out the whole thing. And we don't really care about continuity, so you'd get jumps in sound and like
continuity. What's that?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, stage fright is something that I think it was more successful. I think I had more success introducing people to stage fright than something like maybe Lizard in a Woman's Skin, which is a Fulci film, which is a really great giallo, but it's not in the same league in terms of entertainment. It's just, I can see
kind of more just dark, and you're just letting them torture you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the sort of thing where you can kind of come back from the pub on a Friday night and think, I've had a few beers. Oh, I'll just put a Lizard in a Woman's Skin on, because that'll be a fun 90 minutes.
Very well said. And I mean, what can you do? They're not going to all hit. So you just
they're not. No, I mean, and you're right. Not all of them hit with me. I mean, there's a movie. I mean, that I was revisiting last week. And it's called The Killer Must Kill Again, and it's got Antoine St. John. He's in the Beyond at the start. He's the guy who gets nailed to the wall at the start of the Beyond. But he's an assassin, and it's sort of like Strangers on a Train, but the guy gets him to kill his wife, and then something bad happens, and then he has
awesome to redundant title.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So the killer must kill again.
Kill again.
Yeah, and it's a nice setup, and it moves fairly slowly. So you've got a lot of build up, and you've got a lot of character development, and then it just does something really horrendous about an hour in to one of the characters, and it's and I know Giallo's not got an awful lot of sympathy for its characters, but there's a character in it played by Christina Galbo. And the screenplay just has something hideous happen to her about an hour in. And it was probably one of the only Giallos where I just thought, you know what, I'm really not enjoying this now that they've made that decision. And I went back to watch it again last week thinking, maybe with a bit of distance, I'm probably going to have a slightly different reaction to this. Nope. Exactly the same thing. Got an hour in, just thought, here it comes. Maybe it's going to be better this time. It's like, nope, still horrible. Still don't like it.
But at least you can say you went the extra mile.
Yeah. And, well, does the killer kill again? Well, you'll have to watch it.
I don't know. Then it would be the killer kills 3 times.
Yeah.
3rd time's the charm. The sooner.
Yeah.
It's not. It's too deadly. deadly.
Do like the fact that some of them tell you how many times people are going to get murdered as well. There's like seven deaths in the cat size. The Red Queen kills 9 times. It's the killer reserved 9 seats. So it's like, I'm you're setting me up for basically how many murders I'm going to get in this movie. So you can keep track of them as you go along.
Right. Very cool. So where can we find you on the web outside of your podcast? And
Well, you can find me on the web. I'm in the very well, it's my Twitter handle. It took a long time to think up. I'm at Darren_Gaskell. I've got no idea how I came up with that. Everybody else has got really exotic Twitter handle. It's like, no, first name _surname. So I'm fairly easy to find on Twitter, and I present the HD Movie Podcast with Hayley Alice Roberts, and when it comes back after the short break, I've put it on. I also do a podcast called Socially Distanced Cinema. So we cover movies of all types on both podcasts. So if you want to hear more of my voice, then they're the places to find me.
Please keep promoting those. Yeah, I'm happy to check that other one out. So thank you so much for being on here. Stellar.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Anytime. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we do this literally every week, and it takes about 3 months in between each episode posted, but it's nonstop. It's a party.
Excellent.
Alrighty. Well, Godspeed to you, and you've summed up the genre.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games, music. Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Ah, yes.
I am the master storyteller of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers, the Google Play, Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah.
all that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll go end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was going to be a rough
How could you watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Ba-da, 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 ba-da. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
Hi there. It's Heather from the Watching Netflix Without You podcast. Did you know that there are over 1,200 Netflix original feature films and documentaries? And that number is only growing. So I've made it my mission to watch as many as I possibly can. Then, with a delightful guest or guests, disclaimer, more often than not my brother Ryan, we spend an episode rating, reviewing, and discussing a film at length. The first half of every episode is spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it yet, and in the second half, after a very clear spoiler warning, we dive into it. And that's really about it. You can listen to Watching Netflix Without You on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up